Injuries and urgency. Well, there's plenty of that to go around the league as we kick off week 10 of the NFL season. I'm Adam Wright. You are listening to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. We have a big show planned for you guys tonight. We're going to talk about Josh Allen and how there's a good chance he may not even play against the 7-1 Vikings. We're going to touch on the Buccaneers and how they possibly could be in must-win mode. And we're going to hit on some fantasy football. And we're going to go and talk about a little more about the Jets defense. And joining us and returning to the show for the first time since he was a co-host, we have Brian Mucker, former co-host and co-founder of the Fumblerooski podcast. Brian, welcome back to the show. Why don't you reintroduce yourself to some of our new listeners?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Adam. What's going on, guys? My name is Brian Mucker. I am a sports management here at Dean College. I am from Armonk, New York, and as most of you viewers know, I'm a huge New York Jets fan, and rightfully so, the way that they've been playing football this year.
Yeah, and the Jets are playing some solid football, and you're going to hit on the Jets defense in your guest segment. So very excited to hear about that. A lot of good drafting and free agency from GM Joe Douglas. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but I wanted to start off with the Buffalo Bills. So they lost to the New York Jets in an upset, but to make matters worse, they also possibly lost their starting quarterback for at least a game. So Josh Allen is questionable versus the 7-1 Vikings. He failed to practice in the first two sessions on Wednesday and Thursday, and he managed to get on the practice field in limited fashion on Friday. It was very private. When the media was around, he would always run off the field. So very, very private how the Bills are taking it. And head coach McDermott actually labeled it as hour to hour on whether or not he's going to be available. So they are really taking it down to the last minute. So whether or not he plays is one thing. We'll find out. And I'm sure if you guys are listening to this later on, you might know, whether or not he's ruled out or if he's going to play or game time decision. But we're going to discuss whether or not the Bills can even be without Josh Allen for a game. So the Vikings are 7-1, and there's a reason for it. Very good all-around football. Kirk Cousins is playing mistake-free as usual with him. And also in the standings, the Bills are still first. They hold the decision maker over the Chiefs, who also are 6-2, same as the Bills. And there's also the Ravens, who are 6-3, just a half game behind the Bills. So, Brian, is this a game where the Bills can afford to be without Josh Allen?
No, it is not to me. I think this is going to be a huge blow to Buffalo's offense if Allen does not play. Yes, you do have Case Keenum, but do you think he's going to be a 7-1 team in the Vikings? I don't think Buffalo has a shot, and I think it's a huge blow to the Buffalo offense, considering that, like you said, the Ravens and the Chiefs are right behind them. Not to mention in their division, if they lose this game against the Vikings, they're going to be tied with the Jets and the Dolphins as a 6-3 team. Maybe not even the Dolphins, because the Dolphins are going to be facing a pretty easy opponent coming up. And I think that this is a game that Buffalo really, really desperately needs after losing a very tough battle against the Jets.
That is a fair point. You look at the division itself, the Dolphins are 6-3 right now. So if the Bills were to lose and the Dolphins win, the Dolphins are facing Cleveland. So good chance they come out with a victory there. They would lose control of their division. So they wouldn't just fall like a couple seeds down. They would fall down to barely they'd be in the wild card race at that point, which is a huge blow. And it's tough to leapfrog so many teams, especially this late in the season. We're now more than halfway through. We're in week 10. So if they lose this game, however, looking at Case Keenum with Stephon Diggs, the last time those two were on a team together was 2017 with the Vikings. They went 12-4. And Keenum had a pretty good rapport with Stephon Diggs. So I wouldn't count it out that they come out with a victory here, even if they're without Josh Allen. And also to add on to that, to further add to that narrative, they're facing the Vikings this week. So isn't that interesting?
It is very interesting.
The two former Vikings going up against the current Vikings who are 7-1. But listen, they will for seeding purposes. This is actually a very important game, and either way, they're going to be playing to win. They're going to have to go out there and find a way to win, whether or not it's with Josh Allen, who's injured, or if it's with Case Keenum, who hasn't been a starter in ever since 2018. Yeah, I think the last time was with they were the Redskins in 2018, and Case Keenum had earned himself a starting position after his impressive showing with the Vikings in 2017. But I mean, there's a reason why he's not a starter anymore.
It is a must-win for the Vikings. Or not the Vikings, the Bills. But they are going to be facing a very, very tough pass rushing defense with Zadarius Smith, as everyone knows what he did with the Packers last year. He is a bloodthirsty dynamite coming off that line. And not to mention not only that the Bills may or may not have Josh Allen, they're also losing very key pieces to that defense. We don't know if Matt Milano is going to be healthy, but they're going to be losing Jordan Poyer and Gregory Rousseau. It is going to be very, very, very tough for the Bills to face against a team like the Vikings, 7-1. To me, it is a must-win. The Bills have to win this game, no matter what. It must be a win for them. If they don't win this game, then it is going to be a very, very close race between not only the playoffs and the standings, but the division too.
Yeah, and one last thing I wanted to look at with this team is the Vikings schedule. So why are the Vikings 7-1? They faced the 3-6 Packers, the 1-6 the Lions, who just won their first game in a long time. They won against the Saints, Bears, Dolphins when they were without Tua Tagovailoa, and the struggling Cardinals and the struggling Commanders. And they barely came out. They barely got out against that team. So I almost wonder also if this is not to take away from the Vikings. They're having a solid season, but are they as good as their 7-1 record? I'm not sure if I can say that quite yet. I'm not sure if I can say they are quite yet. I mean,
I just think they're missing a couple key pieces on that defense, but it's possible that they can. I think they just need to clean it up. But like you said, the Vikings, they did face a lot of easy, tough matchups against quarterbacks. Like you said, Tua was out. Cardinals have been struggling. Commanders have been struggling. They've been one of the worst offenses in the league right now. So they have been having it easy for them right now. I think right now that this is going to be a challenge for both teams. If Allen does not play, that's going to be a challenge for the Bills, having a quarterback come in, filling in for Josh Allen and learning the playbook real quick. The Vikings, that's going to be tough too because their defense, they rely more on their offense than their defense.
Yeah, you're certainly right. We'll have to see how this goes, and we'll have to see whether or not Josh Allen plays. I mean, if Josh Allen is a go, then all of this goes away, and there's a very good chance the Bills come out with a victory here. But there's a good chance he's not playing. There's a really good chance he doesn't play, and it'll be Case Keenum stepping in. So we'll have to see how he does if Allen isn't a go. But we'll see. We'll see. Yep. But in the meantime, we do want to move on. Next, we're going to talk about the Buccaneers. We're facing the 6-3 Seahawks this season. This Sunday. And we're going to see if this is a must-win game for the Bucs coming up. So we'll hit on that next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football. They're saying it's a catch. This is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Swings it way down the field to Watkins. Sammy Watkins for the touchdown!
This is the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. I'm Adam Wright with special guest Brian Mucker. Now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have lost. They're coming off 2 straight losses, and they just won their first game after losing 3 in a row. 2 of those games were against sub-500 teams that they lost to. So they just came out with a victory. They are now 4-5, and they're facing the Seahawks, who are having a pretty solid season. That's 6-3. They're going. I believe they're traveling to Seattle.
No, they're actually traveling to London or Germany. Germany. It's a morning game.
All right, so it's in Munich, Germany. Yeah. So, is this a must-win game for the Buccaneers going forward?
It has to be. It has to be. They barely escaped that Rams team, and that Rams team has been a struggling offense. Not saying that the Bucs don't have a struggling offense too. It has to be a must-win game. I mean, yeah, the Seahawks, everybody's surprised the way they've been playing. They have Geno Smith at quarterback, who's been a real shock to the NFL writers. Everybody wrote him off the book, saying he's not going to be good. The Seahawks were never going to be good after Seattle basically dismantled that whole entire offense, or that whole entire team, basically. But yeah, it has to be a must-win for the Buccaneers. I get the Seahawks are 6-3, and they do have a great young secondary. It's just that the Bucs, I think, are. They should be better than they are on paper. I mean, or they have their record supposed to be. That I know Brady is getting older in age. I believe he's 45, I believe, something like that. And the way that offense is with Fournette in the backfield, you have a young tight end core in Greg Otton and Cameron Brate, and then you got 2 good receivers in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans.
It's Cade Otton.
Cade Otton. All right. I think Brady just needs to, I guess, adjust himself in practice. I think he needs to work on these things in practice with these receivers, try to get them on the same page. And hopefully these receivers for him get on the same page for him. If that were to be so, then I think they should be a sub-500 team.
Yeah. So looking at this game, so whether or not it's a must win, if they want to compete for a championship and get up there in the standings, then they need to win this game. But looking at whether or not they're going to make the playoffs, they most likely will. So their division is very, very bad. The second place team is the Atlanta Falcons, who are 4-6. So whether or not they'll make the playoffs, most likely they will. But they do have a fairly easy schedule coming up. So out of the rest of the season, after this game, they're only facing one team with a record above 500, which is the 5-4 Bengals. And the Bengals have been up and down all season long. And they have their issues as well. So whether or not they can get back in this, it's very possible. They could go on a tear here, and let's say they win out. That's a 12-5 record. And probably one of the top seeds, top 2, 3 seeds. They're not getting the 1 seed. They're probably not beating out the Eagles. But 2, 3 seed, that's not out of the question right there. So I see this possibly working out for them. I'm not sure if I would definitely call this a must-win because the Buccaneers aren't in it to make the playoffs. They're in win-now mode. This is a win-now team. Their quarterback isn't getting any younger, obviously. 45-year-old guy in Tom Brady. So they're going to have to win this game. I would definitely classify this as must-win, just simply because their expectations are different than just making the playoffs. They might make the playoffs either way, but if they want to stay in the race to get a high seed and host a playoff game at Raymond James Stadium, they're going to want to beat the 6-3 Seahawks. The Seahawks aren't really that tough. They're overachieving here. Are they as good as their 6-3 record? They're a good team. Kenneth Walker has been a very, very good running back for Seattle. The offensive line is probably the best it's been in years for Seattle. Some young talent coming through. Geno Smith is playing above expectations here, and they still have 2 very good targets in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And their defense is playing the best it has in a very long time as well. I think the Buccaneers can beat them. They can. They need to play at their absolute best in order to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I agree. It has to be a must-win for them, and I think it should be, just because after next week it's going to be their bye week. After their bye week, they're going to be facing 2 not even 500 teams, Cleveland and New Orleans. If they escape the Seahawks, go into their bye week with a win, they're going to have hopefully 2 wins underneath their belt. Now, the next 2 games, I'm looking at their schedule right now. The next 2 games, week 14, week 15, they are facing 2 tough teams in San Francisco and Cincinnati. That is going to be a big challenge for them on their defenses. Obviously, the last 2 games are going to be their divisional games, but they need to win at least, I think, 3 in order to win the division.
Yeah, I would say so. So they have 8 games left. I guess that's a pretty low bar to set though, right? I think they can. That's easy. That's easy. They can do that.
It is
3 out of the next 8 games left.
Yeah, it is. It's just that they're facing after the Seattle game, after their bye, they're facing a Cleveland team that I don't think is even they should be playing to their expectations as well, but they're not playing too well. They're facing another divisional rival in the Saints. They're not even playing that well. They relied too much on Alvin Kamara to get that offense going. But then after that Saints game, they have at San Francisco. That's going to be very tough, especially for that defense going up against one of the top 10 running backs in the league, one of the top 10 tight ends in the league, and then not to mention another top 10 receiver in the league. You also have a Bengals team. You saw what they did against the Panthers. That's going to be tough for them. I know it's the Panthers. Panthers aren't that great, but it's still going to be a challenge for them, especially since their defense has been struggling. Now, they can possibly win their game in Week 16. They're facing a struggling Cardinals team. And then their divisional games, hopefully they lose by the rest of the season. Hopefully they lose at least 2. They can hopefully win at least 5 of their games. Well, 6, including the Seahawks game, if they win this one. That's my expectations for the Bucs. If the Bucs win at least 6 of these games, I think that they'll be just fine going to the playoffs.
Yeah, certainly. I think my expectation is them to make the playoffs.
Yes.
But where I am questioning them is whether or not they're a championship team. That offensive line is a little banged up. Yeah. The running game is the worst it's been in a very long time, mostly because of the offensive line, but it all trickles down. And their wide receivers for some reason are dropping passes. And they have some pretty good wide receivers. Mike Evans, kind of a household name. Chris Godwin, pretty good as a wide receiver 1, let alone that the fact that he's the 2 on that team. So I think the expectation for this team should be championship level. That's what they're made for. That's why Tom Brady came out of retirement. So I do think they need to win this game against the Seahawks. They may be playing this may be a very good Seahawks team here at 6-3. Geno Smith is playing the best football he's ever played, but that shouldn't matter. You're Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. And a top 5 defense. There's no excuse besides the offensive line, I guess. But still, you should be able to overcome that. They need to win this game very badly. All right. Well, I want to move on, and we're going to get to our Week 10 Stardom Sit-Ems for the fantasy football segment of our podcast. So don't go anywhere. Stardom Sit-Ems coming right up.
Way down the field to Watkins. Sammy Watkins for the touchdown.
You are listening to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright here with special guest Brian Mucker. So we have reached the Fumblerooski Fantasy Fix portion of our show. And we are into our Week 10 Stardom Sit-Ems. So, as always, starting with the running backs, we have, as a start, Josh Jacobs versus Indianapolis and Travis Etienne at Kansas City. We're going to sit Devin Singletary versus Minnesota and Jeff Wilson versus Cleveland. Going on to wide receivers, we have, as starts, we have Christian Kirk at Kansas City and Tyler Lockett at Tampa Bay. For sits, we have Deontay Johnson versus New Orleans and Adam Thielen at Buffalo. For tight ends, we have a start for Tyler Higbee versus Arizona and TJ Hawkinson at Buffalo. For sits, we have Dalton Schultz at Green Bay and Gerald Everett at San Francisco. For quarterbacks, we're starting Justin Fields versus Detroit and Dak Prescott at Green Bay. We're going to sit Derek Carr versus Indianapolis and Aaron Rodgers versus Dallas. For defense, we're going to start Saints defense versus Pittsburgh. We're going to start Colts versus Las Vegas. And we're going to sit Vikings at Buffalo and Texans at the Giants. All right. There you have it. Those are our Stardom Sit-Ems for Week 10. And stay tuned for our other episodes where we give you our waiver wire pickups on Tuesdays. And on Fridays, we give you Stardom Sit-Ems just like this one, in case you are wondering who to start. But without further ado, we're going to move to our next segment, which is Brian, who's going to talk about the Jets defense, which is playing out of their mind this year. That's next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football. They're saying it's a catch. It's caught! Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Swings it way down the field to Watkins! Sammy Watkins for the touchdown!
Welcome back to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 Secret Weapon Consulting. I'm Adam Wright with special guest Brian Mucker. Welcome to the guest segment of our show, sponsored by Secret Weapon Consulting for business plans, secret shoppers, bar spotting, server and management training, and so much more. visit www.secretweaponconsulting.com. Now, for our guest segment, Brian is going to hit on the Jets defense, which has helped the Jets to a 6-3 record this season. So, Brian, what do you got?
So I'm going to start, before I start getting into like the players and the draft, I'm going to start based on this. Joe Douglas, amazing job bringing in key pieces that will help this team finally win. Now, I've been a Jets fan for pretty long. I've been through misery, obviously, the last couple of years. But he has, ever since he's been here, the last 3 or 4 years, I believe he's been here, it tells you the background he came from. He was a consultant to the GM of the Eagles when the Eagles won their Super Bowl. The Jets brought in Joe Douglas to help the Jets make a playoff team, not a Super Bowl team yet, but a playoff team. He has done that. He has owned up to those expectations. And by doing so, it tells you what he did in the offseason by bringing in safety Jordan Whitehead, re-signing safety LaMarcus Joyner, signing linebacker Quan Alexander, and bringing in all this pass rushing defense, getting Carl Lawson back from a torn ACL that he suffered last year. You're seeing Quinnen Williams having a Pro Bowl season. Joe Douglas also drafted key pieces to like the cornerback position, the pass rushing off and side of the ball. He brought in Jermaine Johnson. He brought in Sauce Gardner. And on the offensive side of the ball, he did bring in Garrett Wilson. Michael Clemens, I know he doesn't really play that much, but he's a nice pass rushing threat we have. He also brought in cornerback DJ Reed. I have nothing to say, but fantastic job by doing that. And I think it all starts also coming back from the coaching. Robert Saleh, you know where he comes from. He built that 49ers defense over there, ended up going to the Super Bowl. He comes into New York. He gets hired as a head coach. Guess who he hires as defensive coordinator? He hires Jeff Ulbrich. Jeff Ulbrich was defensive coordinator with the Falcons during their Super Bowl days. They have made some very, very great decisions to improve on this franchise. Now, the offensive side of the Jets, I think, needs a little bit of work. I don't think they have a true number one standout receiver yet. Possibly Garrett Wilson could be that true number one receiver in time, but we'll have to wait and see. But other than the Jets defense, I have nothing to say. You saw what they did against New England. You saw what they did against Buffalo, one of the best teams and a team that's supposed to go to the Super Bowl this year. Put a 6-sack spot on them. You saw what happened when Josh Allen got picked off twice. You saw what he did on the sideline. He was frustrated. I've never seen Josh Allen frustrated even frustrated like that. And it's been amazing for them. And I think they want to come into this season and prove all these fans and NFL writers wrong, because a lot of them to start the season literally said, oh no, the Jets are not going to do anything. They're going to win at least 4 or 5 games max. Well, look what the record is. You have plenty more games to play. They're 6-3. They're over that. I just have nothing to say, but fantastic job by Joe Douglas and that organization. Yeah,
and you mentioned how what they did to Josh Allen in that game. They sacked him 5 times, and that Bills offensive line is no joke. 5 times, and they forced him to throw 2 picks. And I mentioned during our last show on Tuesday, they made Josh Allen look like Zach Wilson did the week prior against New England. That was unbelievable. And Zach Wilson, we'll see whether or not he can play. But we already know that at this point in their careers, Josh Allen is an elite quarterback, arguably a top 2 quarterback in this league. Zach Wilson's not quite there. So it's not that surprising that the Patriots were able to make Zach Wilson look the way that he looked. But the fact that the Jets were able to practically crucify this guy, one of the top quarterbacks in the entire league, and make him look the way he looked, that was just an unbelievable performance. Their secondary is looking really good, led by rookie Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, as you mentioned, leading that pass rush. It's just top to bottom, that defense is balling. And like I said earlier this week, this is a team that could easily make a playoff spot. I'm not sure if I would set it as an expectation quite yet, because their offense still needs some squaring away to do. The centerpiece of that offense is the running game. So they need to make sure. I'm not sure. It was a good performance against the Bills, that running game, but I need to make sure that Michael Carter and James Robinson can do it and do exactly what Breece Hall did. But otherwise, like GM Joe Douglas, who took over in 2019, ever since he took over, most of his draft picks have been slam dunks. Maybe not slam dunks, but he's hit on, or at least has been meh on most of these draft picks that he's done. You know, like the only player where the jury is truly still out on is Zach Wilson. We're still figuring out whether or not he's the guy, but we can still see that they can win in spite of him, and he can kind of game manage and just play not screwing up. We can see he can do that. But he needs to play like Josh Allen if he's going to be the number two overall pick. He needs to be playing like Patrick Mahomes. That's it. That's what the expectation should be with this guy. He's the number 2 overall pick in a draft that was supposedly loaded with quarterbacks. And yeah, it's kind of the same way with most of the quarterbacks from that draft. You know, Trey Lance, still looking at him, still looking at Trevor Lawrence. We're still figuring out whether or not Mac Jones is the guy in New England. So it's kind of the same way all around the league. Same with Justin Fields, although he's starting to show flashes, as is Trevor Lawrence. But that's really the only question mark here. And whether or not he can play is kind of the reason why I'm not quite ready to make them contenders yet. The Jets are still a couple of years off, whether it's with somebody else at the helm or if Zach Wilson turns out to be the guy. But still, this is a great transformation for the Jets, and they could be competitive for a couple of years with this young talent.
Well, let's see what Mike LaFleur brings to the table. He is the offensive coordinator. I think he does need to bring it. Maybe this year's draft could focus on bringing in key pieces to the offensive side of the ball rather than the defense, because the defense looks set. When I look at the Jets' schedule, they have a couple of tough matchups coming up. After their bye, they face New England. Week 13, they face a tough Minnesota offense. And then week 14, they face the Bills. But when I look at the rest of the schedule, let's see if Zach Wilson and that defense can pass rush and beat the New England Patriots, the Minnesota Vikings, and perhaps Josh Allen again. Let's see if this team can take it to the next step and the next level in order to be that playoff team. Because when I look at the other opponents that they have coming up facing after their bye week, the Bears, Lions, Jaguars, Seahawks, Miami, I see wins right there. I mean, maybe the Seahawks will be a little tight race there, but when I look at the other three, I see wins right off the top of the bat. Miami puts a lot on their offense more than their defense. So let's just see what Zach Wilson can do. That defense, though, everybody underestimates it. They're looking at it right now. I
don't think anyone's underestimating it now, but not anymore.
I know, but First Take, when I was actually watching First Take today, they were
better than to listen to First Take. Come on.
I know, but like
you should know better.
They would always bash on them. I tend to not listen to any of these NFL writers because I feel like they don't have no clue what the hell they're talking about. Because coming from a Jets fan myself, my father is also a Jets fan. He was even saying, "What are these NFL writers? What are they saying? Are they dumb or something?" Because they even were trashing on the Giants. Look what the Giants are doing. Look what the Giants are doing. Look what the Jets are doing. They were also saying some harsh things on the Seahawks. Look what these three teams are doing right now. They are proving every single person in that NFL studio look wrong. It's just complete wrong, and I think they need to maybe give them some leadway here.
You mean
both
leeway?
Those teams have leeway. Yeah, sorry. Both of these teams have improved in the offseason. And I just think that they need to maybe give these other teams a shot other than the other teams the Broncos and the Raiders. Everybody said that they were going to be good. They've had their frustrations. But other than that, the Jets defense is a defense to watch. And I think it's a nice stream for fantasy owners to stream in fantasy. I have them right now in fantasy. They're doing a very good job.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the best defenses in the league, and that was a statement victory for the Jets there. Not only for their defense, but for their team as a whole, to say we're in the hunt, we're 6-3 for a reason, and we're going to make a playoff push. I don't know if they'll make it. They could. They should. I think they have a very good chance at making it, but we will see on that. But any other thoughts before we end the show tonight?
Other than that, no.
All right. Well, Brian, thank you for joining us on the show. Welcome back. You're always welcome back. Let us know if you want to come back on the show and talk some Jets later on in the season. It'll be interesting to see how they do down the road. They are 6-3, so very much in the hunt for the playoffs. So it should be an interesting stretch. But anyways, that'll do it for us tonight. Thank you for listening to us. We have new episodes out on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also have all our episodes available on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and so much more. Also, be sure to follow our Instagram at Fumblerooski_podcast to keep up with our podcast and latest coverage on the NFL. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Over and out.